I'm showing up in your news feed because you're concerned about the rise of fascism here in the United States and you want to know what to do about it. Well, the Matt Gaetz report just dropped, and I want to talk to you about how a lot of the stuff in there has to do with the typical traits of a strongman and the environment that a strongman creates. We'll be referring to Ruth Ben-Ghiat's Strongmen from Mussolini to the Present. This is part of the Anti-Fascist Book Club, and it's something I recommend you read before January 20th, before Donald Trump resumes the role of President of the United States. So rather than just news coverage or listening to people online talk about this, I encourage you to look at the Gaetz report yourself, because there's a lot of disturbing stuff in there. And obvious content warning. The things that Gaetz has been accused of and the things that the committee found evidence of are disgusting and disturbing. But the best disinfectant is sunlight, and if you want to see what fascists operate like, it's important to look at this type of thing and demand that our government do something about it. So Ruth Ben-Ghiat's part 2 is about tools of rule for an authoritarian, of a strongman. And those 5 tools are each broken down into chapters 4 through 8. First is a greater nation. To sum that up, it is to say, make America great again. The second is propaganda. Third is virility. The fourth is corruption. And the fifth is violence. Now, we know that Matt Gaetz is full-blown MAGA, so he checks that one off the list, the greater nation one. We know that he's an experienced propagandist. Not only has he gotten a ton of interviews on Fox that helps drive coverage in the MAGA narrative, but he's just been given his own show on a right-wing propaganda network. In this, we'll talk about virility, which I think is the most disturbing part of this report, but the report also lays out his corruption, accepting gifts and handing out favors as a member of Congress in violation of the rules of Congress. And 8 is violence. Now, while the Ethics Committee report doesn't quite describe it that way, I would describe the trafficking of a 17-year-old girl by a United States member of Congress who's well above her age. I would characterize that as violence. So Matt Gaetz, who Donald Trump stood by, despite all of the evidence of this type of thing being out in the open, Donald Trump wanted to stick by this man because he had engaged in the 5 tools of rule of the fascist strongman. In Chapter 6, under virility, Ruth Ben-Ghiat writes to remind us of the moment that most people thought that Donald Trump's original campaign was over. When you're a star, they let you do it, Trump said in 2005 about groping and kissing women, unaware that he was being recorded by Billy Bush, producer of the Access Hollywood television program Trump was appearing on. When the tapes leaked shortly before the 2016 election, many thought his political career would be over. Instead, the revelation merely strengthened the misogynist brand of male glamour Trump had built over decades, including as owner of the Trump Model Management and the Miss Universe pageant. For decades, the Miss Universe contest provided Trump with proximity to a large pool of women, and he often entered their dressing rooms when he knew they would be unclothed. Trump models were pressured to serve the boss, including as escorts for his powerful friends. In this chapter, Ruth Ben-Ghiat talks about fascist leaders like Adolf, like Mussolini, like Gaddafi, and then the way that they procured women and engaged in violence against them. And how, despite that being a well-known fact, that these fascist leaders, in the case of Mussolini and Berlusconi and Trump, the misogynistic behavior out in the open only made them more popular, including among fascist women. So while decent people, when they heard the "when you're a star, they let you do it" thing, we thought that Trump's career was going to be over, his political career would end. The fascists saw something different. Ben-Ghiat continues with a quote from InfoWars. During the Trump era, will men finally start acting like men again? That's something that InfoWars asked days after the inauguration the first time around. Trump's followers see him as the dominant male leader America needs. They make posters of the president as John Wayne, Superman, and other male savior figures, which they bring to rallies and post on social media. In Trump's own mind, he is a buff fighter. In 2019, he tweeted an image from his personal Twitter account of his head photoshopped onto the body of Sylvester Stallone's character from the 1976 film Rocky. As a man in his 70s, Trump borrows other men's bodies to show his virility rather than display his own in the tradition of Mussolini or Putin. I want to read that line again. As a man in his 70s, Trump borrows other men's bodies to show his virility rather than display his own in the tradition of Mussolini and Putin. So that's acknowledging that Trump is old and probably impotent. But that doesn't stop him from the fascist politics of misogyny and violence against women. While he may not be able to perform in the way that he used to, he can gather young men around him to perform for him, to perform vicariously through him. And that is one of the reasons why Donald Trump stands by people like Brett Kavanaugh, Pete Hegseth, and Matt Gaetz, despite all of the credible allegations against them. That is why, despite this ethics report and all of the damning evidence and analysis within, Donald Trump will continue to stand by Matt Gaetz. For people like Trump, for fascists, violence and misogyny against women are a tool to maintain power. So if you haven't read it yet, please go check out the Ethics Committee report. You can just Google Gaetz report. It should be right at the top. Make sure that you're looking at the Ethics Committee official website. It'll end with .gov. And read it. Read it so that you know what MAGA continues to stand by despite all of the evidence. And read Ruth Ben-Ghiat's book, Strongmen, because it's going to contextualize all of this terrible stuff that our country is going through. And it's not a downer. This book is not a downer. This book ends with how people fight back and how fascist power always comes to an end. And it provides instruction for you and your community on steps that you can take to build your resilience to resist fascism in all of its forms.